On October 20th, 1981, in the quiet suburb of Nanuet, New York, an ordinary Tuesday transformed into one of the most shocking days in American criminal history. What began as a routine money pickup for Brink's security guards would end with bloodshed, a massive manhunt, and expose a network of radical revolutionaries hiding in plain sight across America. 3 men dead, $1.6 million stolen, a crime that would forever change how America viewed domestic terrorism. This is the story of the 1981 Brink's robbery, a crime that ripped apart families, shattered a community, and forced America to confront the lingering ghosts of 1960s radicalism that had gone underground but never truly disappeared. Before we can understand what happened on that October day, we need to meet the groups involved in this deadly heist. By the late 1970s, most Americans believed the revolutionary fervor of the 1960s had faded away. The Vietnam War had ended. Nixon had resigned. The country was moving forward. But beneath the surface, small pockets of radical groups continued to operate, convinced that violent revolution was still necessary to transform America. Among these groups was the Weather Underground, once notorious for a campaign of bombings across America in the early 1970s. Though many members had surrendered to authorities by 1981, some remained committed to revolutionary action. Another group was the Black Liberation Army, an offshoot of the Black Panthers. By 1981, after years of confrontations with police and several deadly shootouts, most of their members were either dead or in prison. But a small, determined faction remained active. These two groups, despite their different backgrounds, found common cause in what they saw as a fight against American imperialism and racism. Their alliance would prove deadly. Key figures in this story include Kathy Boudin, a Weather Underground member from a prominent legal family, David Gilbert, another Weather Underground member and Boudin's partner, Judith Clark, a dedicated revolutionary, and several members of the Black Liberation Army, including Mutulu Shakur, stepfather of future rapper Tupac Shakur. While these radicals plotted revolution, the men of the Nyack Police Department and Brink security team went about their daily duties, unaware that their paths would soon violently intersect. The 1981 Brink's robbery wasn't a spontaneous crime. It was the culmination of years of planning and part of a larger campaign of robberies. Between 1976 and 1981, this coalition of radicals had already conducted a series of armed robberies across New York and Connecticut, stealing approximately $2 million to fund their revolutionary activities. They called themselves the Family, and their crimes shared a similar pattern: careful surveillance, multiple getaway vehicles, and military-like precision. The Brink's armored car that serviced the Nanuet Mall in Rockland County, New York, presented an appealing target. The schedule was predictable, security procedures were observable, and the suburban location offered multiple escape routes. For months, members of the group studied the Brink's routines. They noted when the truck arrived, how long it stayed, and the exact path guards took carrying money bags. They mapped police stations, identified the quickest routes to highways, and established safe houses in the area. Their plan involved multiple vehicles and carefully assigned roles. Some would directly confront the guards, others would drive getaway cars, while still others would create diversions if needed. They obtained weapons, fake identification, and disguises. What they didn't know was that this robbery would be different from their previous successes. This time, the cost would be measured in lives. October 20th, 1981, began like any other autumn Tuesday in Rockland County. The leaves were changing color. Shoppers browsed the stores at the Nanuet Mall, and at approximately 3:55 p.m., a Brink's armored truck pulled up to make its regular pickup at the Nanuet Mall. Guard Peter Page, 49, and his partner Joe Trombino, 48, started their routine. Page collected money from the mall while Trombino waited in the truck. As Page returned with several bags containing $1.6 million, a red van suddenly pulled up. Several armed men wearing masks jumped out. Within seconds, they opened fire. Peter Page was killed instantly, struck by multiple bullets. Joe Trombino was seriously wounded, shot in the arm and chest, but would survive despite losing most of the use of his arm. The gunman grabbed the money bags and jumped back into the van. The entire robbery took less than 2 minutes. The red van sped away from the mall, headed toward a predetermined location, the Corvette's department store parking lot about a mile away. There, the robbers transferred to a U-Haul truck and a Honda, splitting up the money and the participants. What they didn't realize was that a mall employee had already called the police and provided descriptions of the vehicles. Within minutes, alerts went out to all law enforcement in the area. As the robbers made their escape, police in the nearby town of Nyack quickly established roadblocks on major routes out of the area. One of these roadblocks was set up on an entrance ramp to the New York State Thruway at exit 11. At this checkpoint, Nyack police officer Waverly Brown and Sergeant Edward O'Grady stopped a U-Haul truck. In the cab of the truck sat Kathy Boudin and David Gilbert, 2 white members of the Weather Underground. When asked for identification, Boudin pleaded with the officers, claiming they were being unfairly targeted. She appeared distressed, seeming to be just another citizen inconvenienced by police activity. The officers, focused on Boudin and Gilbert, were unaware that hidden in the back of the U-Haul were several armed members of the Black Liberation Army, including Mutulu Shakur and Nathaniel Burns. As Brown and O'Grady investigated, the back of the U-Haul suddenly opened. The hidden gunmen emerged, weapons ready. Within seconds, they opened fire. Officer Waverly Brown, 45, a Korean War veteran and the first black officer on the Nyack police force, was killed instantly. Sergeant Edward O'Grady, 33, a Marine Corps veteran and father of 3, was mortally wounded and died hours later at a nearby hospital. In the chaos, Kathy Boudin attempted to flee on foot, but was captured by police shortly afterward. David Gilbert, who had been driving the U-Haul, was also apprehended at the scene. However, several other participants managed to escape in another vehicle. The bloodshed in Rockland County shocked the nation. 3 men were dead: Brink's guard Peter Page and police officers Waverly Brown and Edward O'Grady. The brutal nature of the killings and the revelation that the perpetrators were domestic terrorists led to one of the largest manhunts in New York history. The FBI quickly joined local law enforcement in the investigation. The Joint Terrorism Task Force, which had been formed in New York in 1980 specifically to combat domestic terrorism, took a leading role. This would become one of the first major tests of the JTTF's effectiveness. The investigation revealed the broader conspiracy. This wasn't just a robbery gone wrong. It was part of a campaign by revolutionary groups to fund their activities through armed robberies. In the days and months that followed, authorities began tracking down the participants. Some were arrested quickly. Judith Clark was captured after crashing a getaway car. Samuel Brown and Donald Weems, members of the Black Liberation Army, were arrested within days. Catherine Boudin and David Gilbert had already been captured at the scene. Others proved more elusive. Mutulu Shakur remained a fugitive until 1986. Marilyn Buck, who had helped obtain vehicles for the robbery, was captured in 1985. Several participants successfully fled underground, some remaining fugitives for years. As arrests mounted, investigators pieced together the full scope of the conspiracy. They discovered safe houses with weapons, fake identification, and revolutionary literature. They mapped connections between different radical groups and uncovered links to other crimes. The investigation also revealed that some participants had been living double lives, raising families and working regular jobs while secretly planning revolutionary activities. As the captured participants faced justice, their trials became forums for their revolutionary beliefs. Most refused to recognize the authority of the courts, claiming to be political prisoners rather than criminals. Kathy Boudin took a different approach. The daughter of a prominent left-wing attorney and herself a former honor student at Bryn Mawr College, Boudin pleaded guilty to murder and robbery charges. In exchange for a reduced sentence of 20 years to life, she expressed remorse for her role in the deaths. David Gilbert, in contrast, maintained his revolutionary stance. Representing himself at trial, he refused to mount a conventional defense, instead using the proceedings to espouse his political views. He was convicted and sentenced to 75 years to life. Judith Clark similarly used her trial as a platform for revolutionary rhetoric. She refused legal representation, disrupted proceedings, and showed no remorse. She received a sentence of 75 years to life. The members of the Black Liberation Army who were caught also received lengthy sentences. Mutulu Shakur was sentenced to 60 years in prison after his eventual capture. For the families of the victims, the trials provided little comfort. The political grandstanding by many defendants seemed to trivialize the deaths of their loved ones. The widow of Sergeant O'Grady, with 3 young children to raise alone, watched as the killers of her husband portrayed themselves as freedom fighters rather than murderers. The trials also sparked debate about the American criminal justice system. Some leftist groups argued that the defendants were indeed political prisoners, while most Americans viewed them as dangerous terrorists who had murdered innocent men. The aftermath of the Brink's robbery extended far beyond the trials and sentences. For the victims' families, life would never be the same. The children of Sergeant Edward O'Grady grew up without their father. The community of Nyack established scholarships in the names of officers O'Grady and Brown. For law enforcement, the robbery highlighted the continuing threat of domestic terrorism and led to enhanced cooperation between local police and federal agencies. The Joint Terrorism Task Force model, strengthened after this case, became a template for counterterrorism efforts nationwide. The case also raised difficult questions about crime, punishment, and redemption that continue to resonate decades later. In 2003, after 22 years in prison, Kathy Boudin was granted parole, having expressed remorse and worked on education and AIDS programs in prison. Her release sparked both outrage from victims' families and support from those who believed in her rehabilitation. Judith Clark, who had once been a defiant revolutionary, gradually transformed in prison. After decades of exemplary behavior, mentoring other inmates, and expressing genuine remorse, she was granted clemency by Governor Andrew Cuomo in 2016, making her eligible for parole. In 2019, after 37 years in prison, she was released on parole. David Gilbert, who had received the harshest sentence, remained in prison the longest. His sentence was commuted by Governor Cuomo in one of his final acts in office in 2021, making Gilbert eligible for parole after 40 years of incarceration. He was subsequently granted parole and released later that year. The release of these participants sparked renewed debate. Had justice been served with their lengthy incarcerations? Had they truly changed? Did they deserve second chances? For the families of the victims, these releases reopened wounds. Many felt that no amount of prison time could compensate for the lives taken on that October day. The 1981 Brink's robbery stands as a sobering example of what happens when revolutionary ideology justifies violence against innocent people. The participants in the robbery came from privileged backgrounds, college-educated activists who had embraced increasingly extreme tactics as the mainstream left moved toward more conventional politics. Their alliance with the Black Liberation Army created a dangerous combination: the revolutionary rhetoric of the Weather Underground with the tactical experience of the BLA. Yet for all their talk of fighting oppression, their actions created only more suffering. The men they killed, Peter Page, Waverly Brown, and Edward O'Grady, were not symbols of oppression but ordinary working people. Officer Brown, ironically, was himself a groundbreaking figure as the first black officer on the Nyack Force. These victims left behind families who suffered immeasurable loss. The robbery also failed in its revolutionary aims. Rather than sparking wider resistance, it alienated potential sympathizers and strengthened law enforcement's resolve to combat domestic terrorism. Within a few years, most participants were in prison, their revolutionary dreams replaced by the harsh reality of life behind bars. Today, the physical scars of that day have healed. The Nanuet Mall, where the robbery began, has been rebuilt as an outdoor shopping center. The exit ramp where Officers Brown and O'Grady were killed continues to carry travelers to and from the New York Thruway. Life in Rockland County has moved forward.